A French knight named Jean de Joinville stood frozen in horror. It was 1249. He was on the 7th Crusade, and what he had just witnessed in a Mongol war camp would haunt him for the rest of his life. He saw Mongol horsemen take a slab of raw meat, slide it under their saddle, climb on top of it, and ride for hours. Not as punishment, not as some weird ritual, as lunch. By the end of the day, they pulled out the meat, soft, warm, salty, and ready to eat. Joinville wrote it down in his memoirs, certain that no one in Europe would believe him. But he wasn't lying. He was watching the most terrifying military meal in human history, the Mongol Saddle Stew. This is the story of the meat that conquered the world, cooked not in a pot, not on a fire, but under the body of a Mongol warrior at full gallop. Let's go back to around 1200 AD, the steppes of Central Asia. Endless grasslands stretching from China to Eastern Europe. No cities, no villages, no roads. Just wind, horses, and the most efficient killing machine the world had ever seen, the Mongols. Under the leadership of a man named Genghis Khan, they were about to do something no one in history had ever managed. They would ride out of the steppes and conquer the largest empire ever built. Bigger than Rome, bigger than Persia, bigger than Alexander's, and they would do it in less than 100 years. But here's the question that haunts historians even today. How? How did a tribe of nomads with no cities, no farms, and no factories defeat civilizations 1,000 times larger? The answer, surprisingly, was their food, or more accurately, how they ate without ever needing to stop. A Mongol warrior could ride over 100 miles a day, sometimes 150, for weeks, for months, with no cook fire, no tents, no supply wagons, no bread baking behind enemy lines. Because here's the brutal truth of nomadic warfare. Fire is death. A campfire on the steppes can be seen from 20 miles away. One spark, one wisp of smoke, and your enemy knows exactly where you are. So the Mongols did something nobody had ever done before. They removed fire from war completely. No cooking, no smoke, no light. And yet, they still had to eat. They still had to stay alive. They still had to fight. So they invented saddle meat, the most disturbing, the most genius, and the most successful field ration in human history. Here's how it worked. Before a long ride, a Mongol warrior would take a thin slab of horse meat or mutton. He would salt it lightly, sometimes rub it with herbs, sometimes leave it raw. Then he would place it directly on the horse's back, between the saddle and the animal's body. He would climb on top and he would ride, for hours, for an entire day. And while he rode, science took over. The horse's body temperature is about 38 degrees Celsius, slightly warmer than a human's. As the rider galloped across the steppes, that heat rose constantly into the meat. The friction from the saddle pressing down with every movement of the horse acted like a slow, constant kneading process. The horse's sweat, salty and mineral-rich, soaked into the meat from below. The blood inside the meat slowly drained out, removing toughness. And by the end of the day, what came out from under that saddle wasn't raw meat anymore. It was tender, it was salty, it was warm. It was partially broken down by hours of pressure, heat, and movement. It was, in a strange way, cooked, not by fire, but by the horse, the body, and the ride itself. The Mongols would pull it out, slice it thin, and eat it on the move. No fire, no smoke, no trace. The enemy would never know they had passed through. By the time scouts spotted the dust on the horizon, the Mongols had already ridden 80 miles, eaten 3 meals, and were ready for battle. This wasn't just food, this was stealth, this was speed, this was war. But here's where the story gets even more interesting. Modern food scientists have actually replicated this process. In multiple experiments, researchers have placed raw meat under saddles, simulated horse temperature heat, and applied hours of constant pressure. The results were stunning. The meat broke down at a molecular level. The proteins denatured slightly, similar to ceviche where citric acid cooks raw fish. The pressure tenderized the muscle fibers. The salt from sweat penetrated deep into the tissue. After 6 to 8 hours, the meat was safe to eat. Soft, salty, almost like a primitive version of beef tartare. The Mongols weren't being savages, they were being scientists. 800 years before science could explain it. Now here's where the story takes a wild turn. In 1924, a Polish-American researcher named Bertram Leber published a paper that shook the historical community. He claimed that the meat under the saddle wasn't food at all. According to him, the Mongols placed the meat there to treat saddle sores on the horses. The raw flesh acted like a soft cushion, absorbing pressure and protecting the horse's back from getting injured during long rides. By the end of the day, the meat was bruised, bloody, and unfit to eat. So the Mongols simply threw it away, not ate it. For decades, this theory caused massive arguments among historians. Was the saddle meat real food, or was it just animal first aid? The truth, as it usually is more complicated than either side wanted to admit. Modern historians now believe both stories are true. Some Mongol units did use raw meat as saddle padding to protect their horses, but other units, especially during long campaigns and food shortages, absolutely ate the meat afterward. Why? Because hunger doesn't care about hygiene. A Mongol warrior 200 miles deep into enemy territory with no supplies and no fire would eat anything to stay alive. Even meat that had been pressed under his own body for 12 hours. The myth wasn't a myth, it was just selective. Saddle meat was both, cushion for the horse, lunch for the rider. But here's the part that will completely shift the way you see your dinner tonight. The Mongol saddle meat didn't die when the empire fell, it evolved. As Mongol warriors swept across Russia, Eastern Europe, and parts of the Middle East, they brought their food culture with them. Russian and Slavic peoples encountered this strange dish of pounded, salted raw meat. They couldn't pronounce the Mongol name, so they called it after the people themselves, Tartars, the meat of the Tartars, Tartar steak. Soon, German merchants in the city of Hamburg started buying Tartar steak from Russian traders. They modified it, added onions, added eggs, started cooking it slightly. By the 1800s, this dish had become a regional specialty in Hamburg, Germany. They called it Hamburg steak. Then German immigrants brought it to America. American cooks placed it between two slices of bread. They added cheese, lettuce, tomato, sauce, and gave it a new name, the hamburger. Yes, the hamburger, the most American food in the world. The food eaten in every country on Earth. The food sold in over 50 billion units a year. That same hamburger is the direct descendant of a piece of raw meat compressed under a Mongol horseman's saddle 800 years ago. The food chain is real. The history is real. Every burger you have ever eaten in your life carries the genetic memory of the Mongol Saddle Stew. And here's the wildest part. The Mongols didn't just spread their food, they spread their genes too. According to modern DNA studies, around 1 in every 200 men alive today is a direct descendant of Genghis Khan. That's roughly 16 million people. The Mongol Empire ended over 600 years ago, but its blood, its food, and its memory are still riding through the modern world. Right now, today, while you're watching this video. So the next time you bite into a hamburger, remember this. You're not just eating fast food, you're eating a 13th century war ration. You're eating a piece of nomadic genius that crossed continents. You're eating the meal of warriors who conquered half the planet without ever lighting a fire. The Mongol Saddle Stew didn't just feed an army, it fed the future. It built the food culture of the modern world, and it's still on your plate. Fire wasn't needed, pots weren't needed, cooking wasn't needed. All it took was a horse, a saddle, and a warrior who refused to lose. If this story blew your mind, hit that subscribe button and join the Alternate Past family for more forgotten history like this. And tell me in the comments, would you eat meat that was cooked under a galloping horse for an entire day? Yes or no?